Welcome back to Mr. John Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining the family. Please hit the subscribe button so we can keep sharing inspiring stories like this with you on YouTube. The hallway in Frankfort, Kentucky shook with the sharp rhythm of hurried footsteps. Ralph wasn't used to running. He was a man who solved problems with meetings, strategy, and money. But none of that mattered now. His heart pounded as he moved past chipped doors and faded welcome mats, led only by the thin, trembling cries of two little boys on the other side of an apartment door. "Kai? Leo?" he called out, breath tight. "It's Ralph. I'm here." Before he even touched the doorknob, one of the twins screamed again, a sound so raw it punched straight through him. Ralph didn't think twice. He forced the door open, stumbling inside as the boys clung to each other near the kitchen. In that moment, the world narrowed to one sight. Tiffany, flat on the floor. Still, unmoving, her curls spread around her, her hand limp by the cabinet, her breathing uneven, shallow, fading in a way that sent a shock straight through his chest. The boys sobbed so hard their tiny bodies shook, pointing at her, begging him to help. Sometimes life shifts before you understand you're standing at a crossroads. And viewers watching, you know what it feels like, don't you? To push yourself so hard that your vision blurs. To be strong for so long that your body finally says it can't keep going. To carry responsibilities that don't leave room for rest. Some of you know what it's like to have kids looking to you as their whole world, even when you're running on your last bit of strength. Now imagine being at that breaking point, and your children try to get help, but they dial the wrong number. A number belonging to a man who has never met you, never met your kids, and never expected to be pulled into a moment that would change everything. Darling, what happened next is why this story matters. Before we go deeper, please like this video and comment something kind for Tiffany. It truly helps YouTube show this story to more people who need it. Once Ralph stepped farther into the apartment, the air felt heavier, not because of the room itself, but because of what this moment meant. Two toddlers stood there with tear-streaked cheeks, gripping each other, like the world had tilted. This wasn't a situation anyone prepared for. Not a mother. Not two 3-year-olds. Not a billionaire who lived his life avoiding emotional storms altogether. Yet here they all were. A single mother lying unconscious on the floor. Two children who had no idea how to save her, but tried anyway. And the man who answered a call that wasn't meant for him. Viewers, this is where we pause and connect the dots. A mother who has worked herself past her limit. Children too young to understand danger, yet brave enough to reach for help. A stranger with every reason to ignore an unknown number. But didn't. That's the heart of this story. It reminds us how unpredictable life can be. How one ordinary morning can flip into a moment that demands everything from you. How someone who seems unlikely, someone from a completely different world, can suddenly become the only person standing between life and tragedy. And now I want to ask you, the one watching, what would you do if fate placed a stranger at your doorstep, at the exact moment you needed someone the most? Would you reject the help? Would you question why they showed up? Or would you accept that sometimes help doesn't arrive the way we expect? Because for Tiffany, Kai, and Leo, help came from a man they had never met. And for Ralph, this moment would change more than he ever imagined. Kai was the first to run toward Ralph, grabbing his pant leg with trembling fingers. Leo pointed toward the kitchen, crying so hard his breaths came in tiny gasps. Their fear wasn't quiet. It filled the room, shaking Ralph in a way he had never experienced. "Help Mommy! She not waking up," Kai choked out. Ralph didn't answer. He moved. His feet hit the floor hard as he crossed the small living room, his pulse thundering louder than the twins' cries. When he reached the kitchen doorway, the sight stopped him mid-step. Tiffany wasn't just lying there. Her chest rose unevenly. Her forehead glistened with sweat. Her hand twitched once, then went still again. It was the kind of moment that steals the air from a room. "Kai, Leo," Ralph said tightly. "Stay behind me." He lowered himself beside her, checking her pulse, his breath catching at how faint it felt. Something inside him kicked into overdrive. Protective, fierce, urgent. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew enough to realize she needed immediate help. "Hang on," he murmured, already reaching for her. "I've got you." As he lifted her off the floor, the boys screamed, a raw, terrified sound that sliced through him. "Mommy, don't let her go." Ralph held her closer, gripping her like she might slip through his arms if he loosened his hold even slightly. This wasn't business. This wasn't logic. This was a moment where a man who lived behind walls felt those walls crack wide open. Ralph pushed through the apartment door with Tiffany in his arms, the twins scrambling behind him on unsteady legs. His car sat crooked in the parking lot. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting her help before her breathing slipped any further. "Come on, boys. Stay close," he urged, opening the back door so they could climb in. Their hands never left her arm, as if afraid she would disappear if they blinked. The drive to the hospital felt both too fast and painfully slow. Every red light mocked him. Every uneven sound from Tiffany made his throat tighten. Kai sobbed softly. Leo whispered, "Mommy, wake up, Mommy," again and again. When they reached the emergency entrance, Ralph didn't hesitate. He lifted her again, her head resting against his shoulder, and rushed inside. "Need assistance here," he shouted, voice breaking in a way he didn't recognize. Nurses turned immediately. 2 rushed for a stretcher. Another reached for the twins, who clung to Ralph's shirt like he was the only steady thing in their world. As Tiffany was transferred to the stretcher, Leo cried out, reaching for her with both hands. "Mommy, don't go!" Ralph bent down, steadying both twins with one arm. "She's going to get help," he said, breath rough. "I'm right here. I promise." The nurses wheeled Tiffany through the double doors. The boys wailed. Ralph swallowed hard, his chest tightening in a way that felt painfully unfamiliar. This wasn't supposed to be his world, yet here he was, in the center of it. Before we continue, please like this video and comment something uplifting for Tiffany. Your support helps this story reach more people who love meaningful, emotional real-life stories. Morning in Frankfurt always came quietly for Tiffany, but quiet didn't mean easy. The sun had barely pushed above the rooftops when she was already moving through her small apartment, hair tied back, eyes slightly dull from another night of sleeping in fragments instead of hours. The twins, Kai and Leo, were already awake, full energy before breakfast, their little feet tapping across the floor like drums warming up for a show. Tiffany loved them with everything she had, but love didn't erase exhaustion. She lifted Kai onto the counter so she could tie his shoe while trying to stop Leo from climbing onto a chair that was never meant to hold a 3-year-old's curiosity. She managed both tasks, with one hand steadying one child and the other hand grabbing a bowl from the cabinet. "Sit down, babies. Mommy's fixing oatmeal," she said, her voice warm but thin. Their apartment was small, but it held the soul of her upbringing, pieces of black Southern comfort tucked into every corner. The old gospel playlist she played on Sundays. The framed photo of her grandmother beside the stove. The faint smell of shea butter from the twins' hair routine the night before. These were her roots, and though life wasn't simple, she carried them proudly. But lately, even her roots felt heavy. Bills sat on the kitchen counter, each envelope a reminder of how much she was juggling without help. She worked shifts that stretched longer than any human should manage, and childcare costs took more than half her paycheck. She didn't complain. Life didn't give her the room to, but her body felt the weight even when her spirit refused to break. She stirred the oatmeal too long, her hands slowing as her thoughts wandered. How many more shifts could she take before she completely ran out of fuel? How many times could she stretch herself thin without snapping? The answers never came, but the questions stayed with her like shadows she didn't invite. The twins tugged her shirt. "Mommy, look, I made a circle," Kai announced, pointing to a spoonful of oatmeal he shaped on the table. She should have laughed. Usually she would. But today her smile struggled to find its way. "Eat your breakfast, sweethearts," she said softly. Her legs felt heavier than usual. She leaned against the counter longer than she meant to, hoping the dizziness would fade the way it normally did. It didn't. Instead it grew thicker, like the air around her had changed. She blinked hard, then again. Her chest tightened, her breath grew shallow. Her fingers trembled when she reached for a glass of water. The glass slipped, clattering into the sink. Even that small sound made the twins look up. You okay, Mommy? Kai asked, brow scrunched. I'm fine, baby. Mommy just needs a minute. But she didn't have a minute. Not today. Her vision blurred around the edges. The kitchen light seemed too bright. A deep fatigue, deeper than anything she'd felt before, crawled through her body, dragging her down from the inside. She tried to stand up straight. She tried to breathe normally. She tried to keep going the way she always did, but her body had reached its limit. The floor felt closer. The counter wasn't steady enough. Her knees buckled. Her hand reached for something to hold on to, but found nothing. The twins gasped as she swayed. Mommy, Leo whispered. Tiffany didn't answer. Her body simply stopped fighting. Her eyes closed as she fell, her cheek brushing the cold tile before everything faded into silence. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a quiet collapse, the kind exhaustion forces when strength is no longer enough. Kai froze. Leo ran to her side. Their little voices trembled as they tried to wake her, shaking her shoulder, patting her face. But Tiffany's body didn't respond. Her breaths were shallow. Her skin felt warm. And though the twins didn't understand the seriousness, they understood one thing. Mommy wasn't getting up. And for the first time in their young lives, fear wasn't just a feeling. It was a reality sitting right beside them on the floor. For a few seconds after Tiffany hit the floor, the apartment fell into a kind of silence the twins had never heard before. It wasn't the peaceful kind that drifted through on quiet mornings. This silence felt wrong. Heavy. Scary. Mommy? Kai whispered again, his voice thinner this time. Leo knelt beside her, pressing his small hand against her arm the way she did when he fell and scraped his knee. He waited for her to respond. She didn't move. Not even a twitch. Fear settled into his eyes. Wake up, Mommy, please wake up. Kai's breathing grew shallow. His hands shook as he reached for Tiffany's face, lightly tapping her cheek the way he'd seen her do to him when he pretended to sleep during nap time. But this time she didn't smile. She didn't say, Boy, get up before I come get you. Nothing. Tears welled in Kai's eyes. His lip trembled. Leo. She not waking up. Leo inched closer, curling against her side. His voice cracked. What we do. And somewhere in that tiny moment of panic, a spark of memory lit in Kai's mind. Something Tiffany had always said during their playful moments. If Mommy fall, baby, call for help. She said it with a smile then, pretending to faint dramatically onto the couch. They always giggled. She always got back up. It always ended with a hug. Kai wiped his tears with the back of his hand and looked around the kitchen, spotting Tiffany's phone on the counter. It felt far away, but he knew they needed it. I get it, he said, his voice sounding braver than he felt. He climbed onto a chair, then onto the counter, grabbing the phone with both hands before dropping down with a thud. Leo gasped and ran to him. You okay? Uh-huh, Kai answered, though his voice wobbled. He tapped the screen, watching it light up. He didn't know the numbers to press. He didn't know how to call anyone. But toddlers believe trying is enough, and in their little world, effort always felt like a solution. Leo leaned in, touching the screen with random taps. Call help, he whispered. Yeah, call help. They pressed more buttons. Numbers appeared, disappeared, reappeared. They didn't know what they were doing, only that they needed someone older, stronger, someone like the neighbors Tiffany sometimes waved to in the hallway. The phone rang. Both boys froze, eyes wide. They stared at each other, then at Tiffany, then back at the phone. They waited. The ring sounded again, and again. A click. Someone answered. Leo's breath hitched. Kai clutched the phone tighter. Mommy fell, he said, his voice barely audible. Mommy not waking up. There was silence on the other end. Not the kind from before. This was surprise, confusion, then something else the boys didn't understand. Where is your mom? The voice asked. Lower now. Steadier. On the floor, Leo said, sniffing. She breathing. But not good. The man exhaled sharply. Is there another adult with you? No adult, Kai said. Just us. Another stretch of silence. A shift. The voice changed. From stern to focused. What's your name? Kai, Leo, the other added. The man repeated their names under his breath. Okay, don't hang up. I'm coming. Kai looked around the apartment, confused. You know our home? Not yet, the man answered. Tell me anything you remember. Anything at all. The twins tried. They named the color of their door, the big tree outside, the stairs they climbed every morning. The man listened, piecing their broken descriptions together. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't ask how they got his number. He didn't even question why toddlers were calling him. He simply made a decision, a fast one. Listen to me, he said. Stay beside your mommy. Keep the phone near her. I'm on my way. Leo wiped his nose with his sleeve. You coming now? Yes, right now. Kai's voice quivered. You help mommy? A pause. Then a promise. I won't let anything happen to her. The boys believed him instantly. Not because they understood who he was, but because they needed someone to believe in. On the other end of the line, Ralph grabbed his keys, his heartbeat pounding harder than it had in years. He didn't know these children. He didn't know their mother. He didn't know how they reached him. But none of that mattered. Someone needed him, and without hesitation, he left everything behind and ran for his car. Back in the apartment, the twins sat beside Tiffany, clutching the phone, repeating the only words that made sense. Help coming, Mommy. Help coming. Ralph didn't remember fastening his seatbelt. He barely remembered locking his door behind him. He only remembered the urgency in the voices of two children he had never met. Their fear cut through him more sharply than he expected, pushing him into motion faster than reason could intervene. He followed the directions he pieced together from their small descriptions. The big tree, the stairs, the brown door with a sticker near the bottom. His car sped through Frankfurt, past familiar streets and neighborhoods he usually passed without a second thought. But today, every second mattered. The closer he got, the more his mind raced. Who were these children? Who was their mother? Why did they have access to his private emergency line? None of the questions slowed him down. If anything, they pushed him harder. When he reached the apartment complex, he parked unevenly, the back tire slightly touching the curb. He didn't care. He jumped out of the car, scanning the buildings until he spotted the one that matched the boys' descriptions. The complex was older. The kind of place where families leaned out of windows to greet neighbors, where children played in grassy patches near the walkway. It was a world Ralph didn't normally step into. His own environment was quiet, structured, controlled. This place was alive, and right now, on the edge of fear. He ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Kai? Leo? He called softly, trying not to startle them. It's Ralph. I'm here. A shuffle sounded behind the door. Whispers followed. You open it. No, you. Then tiny footsteps approached. The door cracked open. Two sets of wide, identical eyes peered out at him. Kai held the phone in both hands, gripping it like a lifeline. Leo had tear tracks down his cheeks, his curls slightly damp from crying. You came, Kai said, his voice shaking but hopeful. Yes, Ralph said gently. Can I come in? Leo nodded quickly and pushed the door wider. Ralph stepped inside, and his breath caught. The apartment was small but filled with warmth. Children's drawings taped to the wall. Toys scattered near the couch. A faint scent of baby shampoo lingering in the air. But all of that faded when he saw Tiffany. She was still on the floor, lying exactly where she fell. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin warm with a flush that didn't look healthy. One hand rested limply near the cabinet, and a strand of her hair had fallen across her face. Ralph felt something tighten in his chest, a mix of alarm and something he didn't have a name for. Mommy not waking up, Leo whispered, pointing at her. Ralph dropped to his knees beside her. Okay, let me see. He checked her pulse. Still there, weak but steady. He checked her breathing. Uneven. Her forehead felt too warm. She needed help immediately. It's okay, he murmured, not sure who he was comforting more, Tiffany or the twins. I'm going to take her to the hospital. Kai grabbed his sleeve, eyes full of fear. You not leave us, right? Ralph shook his head. You're coming with me. Leo let out a shaky exhale, relief loosening the tension in his small shoulders. Ralph slid one arm beneath Tiffany's back and the other under her knees. As he lifted her, her head rested against his shoulder. She was lighter than he expected, too light, and the realization deepened the concern etched on his face. He stood up carefully, making sure her head didn't tilt back too far. "Stay close," he told the twins. They followed him step for step, their hands brushing the fabric of his pants as if he were the only anchor they had left. When he carried her out of the apartment, a neighbor peeked out from another door, but no one stopped them. Ralph navigated the stairs slowly, mindful of her limp form and the boys trailing beside him. He reached the car, opened the back door, and gently settled Tiffany inside. Kai and Leo climbed in after her, sitting on each side of her as if guarding her. "Hold her hand," Ralph said softly. He shut the door and moved to the driver's seat, starting the engine with urgency, tightening his grip. The hospital wasn't far, but every minute felt stretched. As he drove, Kai whispered to Tiffany, "We going, Mommy. He helping you." Leo added, "Yeah." He fast. A moment passed before Ralph spoke, keeping his eyes on the road. "I promise I'm getting her there." When they reached the hospital, he parked near the emergency entrance and ran to the back door, lifting Tiffany again. The twins kept close to his legs, matching his pace with small, frantic steps. Inside the automatic doors, the bright overhead lights met the sound of controlled chaos. "Need assistance?" Ralph called out, raising his voice for the first time in years. Nurses turned at once, and a stretcher rolled forward. As Tiffany was placed on it, Kai started crying again. Leo clutched Ralph's leg, unwilling to let go. Ralph placed a hand on each boy's shoulder. "I'm right here," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere," for reasons he couldn't explain yet. He meant it. The waiting room of the hospital buzzed with the everyday movements of staff and families, but for Ralph, everything felt strangely intensified. The overhead announcements, the soft rolling of carts, the ringing phones. He noticed each sound, only because he was trying to steady himself. Kai and Leo didn't make that task easy. The moment a nurse directed them to sit in a cluster of chairs near the wall, the twins abandoned the idea entirely. Kai climbed onto Ralph's lap, gripping the collar of his shirt like it was a seatbelt. Leo stood on the chair beside him, then slowly inched his way onto Ralph's shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ralph froze. He had never held children in his arms, let alone had one treating him like a mountain to scale. His hands hovered awkwardly in the air, afraid to move too suddenly. "Kai, Leo," he started, voice low, "maybe you should—" Leo slipped slightly, and Ralph's hands instinctively grabbed him before he could fall. The toddler settled comfortably against him, pressing his cheek to Ralph's shoulder with a small sigh. Ralph swallowed hard. He didn't expect that feeling. Something warm, protective, and unfamiliar. A nurse passing by slowed her steps, smiling softly at the sight. "They like you," she said. "I noticed," Ralph replied, unsure what to do with his hands now occupied by two small, very determined boys. Kai tugged at his sleeve. "My mommy okay?" Kai accepted the answer, though worry still clouded his little eyes. Leo, now settled comfortably against Ralph, whispered, "You stay?" Ralph hesitated, not because he wanted to leave, but because the question hit deeper than he expected. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm staying." The twins relaxed immediately, as if that promise was enough to hold their small world together. Minutes felt longer than they should. Ralph kept expecting a doctor to appear, but the hallway remained busy with everyone except the person he wanted to see. Kai eventually slid off his lap and wandered toward the corner where a box of plastic toys sat. Leo followed, dragging a tiny chair beside him. Ralph watched closely, unsure if he should go with them, stay seated, or ask the nurse if he was allowed to move. He wasn't used to feeling out of place. In business meetings, he commanded rooms effortlessly. Here, he felt like a guest in a world he had never visited. A different nurse walked by, eyes lingering on him and the twins. "Are you their uncle?" she asked softly. "No," Ralph answered. "Just someone who answered a call." The nurse paused, looking at him more carefully now. "Well, they seem safe with you. That matters." He didn't know how to respond, so he nodded, though something in his chest tightened again. The boys began tapping toys together in a rhythm, only they understood. One moment they were laughing at nothing, The next moment Kai dropped a block and looked over at Ralph with sudden fear. "That sounded like Mommy falling," he whispered. Ralph stood immediately and walked to them, kneeling between the two boys. "No," he said softly. "That was just a toy. Nothing is happening to your mom right now. She's safe." Kai nodded slowly and inched closer to him, leaning against Ralph's arm. Leo mirrored him on the other side. Ralph let them rest against him, releasing a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. At last, after what felt like a climb through endless seconds, a doctor approached. "Family for Tiffany," he called. Kai and Leo jumped up, running toward him. Ralph followed quickly, his heartbeat rising again. The doctor knelt to their level first, a gesture that made Ralph exhale with quiet relief. "Your mom is stable now," the doctor said. "She was dehydrated and very tired. She's resting, and she will wake up soon." Kai threw his arms around Leo in relief. Leo jumped once, then grabbed Ralph's hand without hesitation. Ralph felt another unfamiliar tug inside his chest. "When can we see her?" he asked. "In a little while," the doctor replied. "We want to let her rest before visitors come in." Kai nodded, then tugged Ralph's sleeve gently. "You come see Mommy too." Ralph looked down at the boy who trusted him completely after a single morning of chaos. "Yes," he said. "I'll be there." The doctor walked away, and the twins latched onto Ralph again, wrapping around his arms as if he were the anchor keeping them steady. Ralph looked out over the waiting room, a place he never expected to be, holding children he'd never met. Yet he wasn't leaving. Not now, not after what they'd been through. Before the scene closed, Ralph lifted his gaze and spoke to the camera, the viewers watching this story unfold. If you're watching this, please take a moment to like this video and comment something kind for Tiffany. It truly helps us share stories like this with more people who need them. The hospital room was dim, lit only by a small lamp near the sink and the soft glow from the monitor beside Tiffany's bed. Everything smelled faintly of antiseptic, but underneath it lingered the warmth of a place designed for healing. Ralph stood just inside the doorway, unsure whether he should step farther in. A nurse had led him there while another kept the twins occupied with juice cartons and crayons. Even with their temporary distraction, Kai and Leo kept glancing toward the hallway as if waiting for permission to run after him. "Only a few minutes," the nurse warned gently. "She's waking slowly." Ralph nodded, his eyes drawn to the woman lying beneath the thin blanket. Tiffany looked different now. Not the fragile stillness of earlier, but not her full strength either. Her breathing was steadier. Her lips moved slightly, as if forming words she wasn't ready to voice. A few curls stuck to her forehead and her hand twitched faintly against the sheet. He stepped closer. Seeing her collapse on the kitchen floor was an image he hadn't shaken off yet. It replayed in his mind with every blink, stirring an unexpected pressure in his chest. He didn't understand why it affected him the way it did. Only that seeing her unconscious had awakened a concern he didn't expect to feel for a stranger. As he drew nearer, Tiffany's eyelids fluttered. Her gaze wandered first, unfocused, hazy, until it found him. For a moment she simply stared, trying to piece together the unfamiliar face. Then confusion washed across her features. She swallowed, her voice raspy. "Who?" Ralph stepped closer, keeping his tone low, steady. "It's okay. You're in the hospital." "You fainted." Her brows knit together as she blinked away the fog. "My boys, Kai, Leo, where are they?" "They're safe," Ralph answered immediately. "They're in the waiting room with a nurse. They haven't left your side since I brought you in." Relief softened her expression, but it was followed by another emotion, embarrassment. She tried to sit up, only for her body to protest, her shoulders slumping back against the pillow. I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause all this. I shouldn't have." "I didn't think I was that tired." "You don't need to apologize," Ralph said, surprised by how firmly the words left him. "You were exhausted. Anyone would be." She gave a weak shake of her head. "I should have been stronger. I can't afford to—" "Tiffany," he said gently, "you passed out. That's not something you can overpower with will alone." She blinked again, processing the sound of her name from a total stranger. Wait, how do you know my name? He hesitated. Your boys called me. Her eyes widened, confusion deepening. They called you, but I don't understand. I don't even know you. I know, Ralph said softly. They didn't mean to. They were scared, and they pressed numbers until something connected. My phone rang. I answered. She let the statement settle in the air. You answered? She repeated. I don't usually answer unknown calls, Ralph admitted, surprising even himself with that truth. But I heard Leo crying before I could hang up. Then Kai tried explaining what happened. He paused, recalling the tremble in their voices. I knew they needed someone. Tiffany's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something like gratitude and disbelief colliding at once. So, you just came? Just like that? Yes, he said, right away. She studied him, really looked at him, the crisp shirt he never changed out of, the expensive watch slightly askew, the posture of someone who wasn't used to sitting still in urgent situations. He was clearly not from her world, yet here he stood, quietly present, as if no other place mattered more. You don't have to thank me, Ralph replied. I'm just glad I got there in time. A small silence filled the room, not awkward, but careful. Tiffany shifted her hand on the blanket, her fingers brushing her stomach as though grounding herself. You must think I'm irresponsible, she said softly. Passing out like that with 2 little kids. No, Ralph said quickly. Not for a second. You're carrying so much on your own. Anyone would reach a limit. Her lips parted slightly, a faint breath escaping through them. She hadn't expected compassion, especially not from someone who looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a hospital at dawn. A tired laugh escaped her. This is not how I wanted to meet anyone new. Ralph allowed the corner of his mouth to lift, almost a smile. I understand. Before she could respond, the door swung open. Kai darted inside first, ignoring the nurse calling after him, and ran straight to her bedside. Leo followed so fast he nearly tripped, catching himself on the foot of the bed. Mommy! They shouted in unison. Tiffany reached for them with trembling arms, pulling both boys close as they buried their faces against her. I'm okay, she whispered into their hair. I'm right here. The twins clung tighter, their small bodies trembling with leftover fear. Ralph stepped back slightly, giving them space, but Tiffany lifted her gaze to him once more. Their eyes met, hers full of gratitude, his full of something he wasn't ready to define yet. Thank you, she said again, this time with deeper meaning. He nodded once. Kai peeked up at her, then pointed at Ralph. He helped you, Mommy. He stayed, Leo added. Tiffany looked at Ralph, not as a stranger anymore, but as the man who showed up for her children in the moment they needed someone most. And something quiet settled between them. Something new, unspoken, but undeniable. After the initial flood of relief, the room gradually settled into a quieter rhythm. Tiffany leaned back against the pillows, still holding Kai and Leo close. Their small hands curled into the fabric of her hospital gown as if they feared she might disappear again. She stroked their heads gently, whispering reassurances, letting them feel her voice more than hear it. Ralph lingered near the foot of the bed, unsure whether he should stay or step out. He wasn't a family member. He wasn't even a friend. Yet the thought of leaving felt wrong, almost irresponsible, after everything that had happened. A nurse entered softly. We'll move her to observation in about an hour, she said. She needs rest, fluids, and someone keeping an eye on her when she gets home. Tiffany nodded, though her expression tightened slightly. I'll manage, she murmured. The nurse hesitated. You really shouldn't be alone for the next day or two. Kai and Leo lifted their heads instantly. We help Mommy, Leo announced proudly. Kai nodded, patting her arm. We big boys, the nurse smiled kindly. That's sweet, but she'll need a grown-up too. Tiffany exhaled with a mix of gratitude and dread. She didn't have anyone she could call. Not someone close enough to show up. Not someone whose schedule wasn't just as overpacked as hers. Ralph stepped forward before he had time to overthink. "I can stay," he said. The room went still. Tiffany blinked, taken aback. "You... stay?" Kai and Leo looked between them, then at Ralph, their eyes lighting with instant approval. The nurse smiled again. "Well, if you're available, it would help a lot." Tiffany's cheeks warmed. I don't want to inconvenience you." "You're not," Ralph replied quickly. "I already cleared my day." That wasn't true. He had major meetings scheduled, ones people had been arranging for weeks. But at this moment, they didn't matter. Not compared to the sight of Tiffany struggling to sit upright, or the fear still clinging to Kai and Leo. The nurse nodded once more and quietly exited the room. Tiffany turned toward Ralph, studying him as if trying to figure out what kind of man walks into chaos and stays willingly. "You've done enough already," she said softly. "You brought me here, stayed with my boys. You didn't have to do any of that." "I know," Ralph said, "but I wanted to—" She looked down, unsure how to respond to sincerity that felt unfamiliar. Her world was full of responsibilities, not surprises. Support wasn't something she was used to receiving, especially not from someone who carried himself like he belonged to a different life entirely. Leo tugged on Ralph's sleeve, breaking the tension. "You come home with us?" Ralph glanced at Tiffany for permission. She exhaled. "They're not going to forget you said you'd stay." He allowed a faint smile. "I don't plan to—" The boys cheered softly, hugging their mom again before sliding off the bed to play with the plastic cup and paper bracelet they found fascinating. Tiffany watched them with a tired smile before turning her eyes back to Ralph. "You really don't have to do this," she repeated, her voice weakening with the strain of the morning. Ralph stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she could feel his sincerity. "Tiffany, they trusted me today. You trusted me the moment you woke up. I'm not walking out on that." Her throat tightened slightly. She didn't know why his words touched her the way they did, but there was something steady in the way he said them, something reassuring. A few hours later, after Tiffany was cleared for discharge, Ralph carried her paperwork, her tote bag, and anything else the nurse handed over. Kai and Leo walked on either side of him like they were part of a tiny parade, proudly holding the straps of the bag he wasn't letting them carry. Tiffany walked slowly beside them, still drained but steady enough to make it to the car. When they reached his vehicle, she paused, taking in the sleek shine and quiet luxury of it. "This your car?" she asked, eyebrows lifting. Ralph opened the back door for the twins. "Yes." She gave him a look that lingered between surprise and amusement. "You're really not from my world, are you?" He didn't know how to answer without sounding arrogant, so he simply said, "I'm from a different one. But that doesn't mean I can't be here." Her gaze softened, though she quickly looked away before he could read too much into it. When they arrived at her apartment, Ralph walked ahead to open the door for her. Inside, the quiet felt different, a reminder of the morning's fear. Tiffany stepped in cautiously, glancing at the kitchen where she collapsed. A flicker of vulnerability crossed her face. Ralph noticed. Without asking, he checked the floor, picked up the fallen cup and bowl, and placed them in the sink. He straightened the chair Kai used earlier, then moved to the curtains where one of the rods had been slightly bent. "You don't have to do that," she said, watching as he examined it. "I know," he replied, adjusting it gently, "but it needs fixing." "That doesn't mean you need to fix it," she countered. He glanced at her. "Maybe I want to—" Leo ran to the toy basket, pulling out a stuffed bear missing one eye. "Look, Ralph!" he shouted. Ralph pretended to inspect it seriously. "He looks brave." Kai laughed. "He a superhero." The room lightened immediately, Tiffany's worry easing into a smile she didn't have the strength to fight. Still watching them interact, she felt a quiet confusion curl under her ribs. Why was this man still here? Why did he care? Why did he look at her kids like they were worth his time? She didn't know the answer. And Ralph couldn't explain it either. He only knew one thing. Walking away didn't feel like an option anymore. The days following Tiffany's collapse moved slowly at first. She spent most of her time resting while Kai and Leo played with toy blocks on the living room rug. But no matter the hour, no matter the weather, Ralph always showed up, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency that settled into the household like a steady heartbeat. He knocked gently each time, as if afraid to impose. Yet the twins ran to the door the second they heard him, shouting his name like he had been part of their world forever. "Ralph! Ralph!" Kai grabbed his hand. "You come play cars?" Leo tugged the other sleeve. "No, he comes stack blocks." Ralph didn't know how to do either activity with grace, but he sat cross-legged on the floor anyway, letting the boys climb into his lap as they showed him which block made the best tower and which car was the fastest in the whole world. Tiffany watched from the couch, still recovering but awake enough to absorb the scene. The sight of Ralph, a man who walked through boardrooms with authority, sitting awkwardly among colorful plastic toys and toddler chatter, made her smile without trying. "You don't have to let them jump all over you," she teased lightly. "They seem determined," Ralph replied, his tone calm even as Leo wrapped both arms around his neck. Tiffany shook her head with a soft laugh. "Yeah, they get attached fast." "So I've noticed," he said, allowing a small, genuine smile to appear. Outside their apartment, the neighborhood had already begun talking. Word spread quickly whenever someone unfamiliar, especially someone dressed as sharply as Ralph, became a regular visitor. Aunties who sat on their porches in the late afternoon called out to Tiffany whenever she stepped outside to get the mail or bring in a bag of groceries. "So who that fine man helping you with them babies?" one woman asked, a knowing grin on her face. Tiffany nearly choked on her own breath. It's not like that. He's just helping out, another woman hummed from her balcony. "Helping real good, from what I've seen." Ralph stepped outside just in time to hear the laughter ripple through the yard. He glanced at Tiffany as she covered her face with her hand. "They're teasing you," he observed. "No, they're teasing us," she corrected, shooting a playful glare toward the aunties. One of them shouted, "We love to see it, girl." He had never been teased like this. No one in his life spoke with such unfiltered joy or bold humor. It was unfamiliar, and strangely comforting. A small part of him liked that these women cared about Tiffany enough to tease her, and liked that they included him in their commentary without hesitation. Later that afternoon, Tiffany brought him a glass of iced tea. Nothing fancy, nothing ceremonious. She just handed it to him, while he struggled to assemble a toy kitchen the twins insisted needed grown-up building skills. "You really don't have to do all this," she said gently, settling onto the couch. "I know," he replied, tightening a screw that refused to cooperate. "But I don't mind." "You say that now. Let's see if you still say it after they start asking you to do bedtime stories." Ralph paused, picturing himself reading a storybook aloud. The image made him shift awkwardly. Tiffany noticed and laughed again, a warm, easy sound that spread through the room like sunlight. As the days passed, Ralph learned more about her world, not through lectures but through quiet, everyday moments. He tasted dishes she grew up eating, cooked with the kind of seasoning that made him blink twice because he wasn't used to flavor hitting that boldly. "Is it too much for you?" she asked, amused. He shook his head quickly. "No, it's different. In a good way." Kai and Leo were quick to pull him into neighborhood park days, running ahead of him as he tried, unsuccessfully, to keep up with their boundless energy. At the park, children ran freely, parents exchanged stories, and elders offered advice that was half wise and half humorous. Ralph stood out from the crowd, but no one treated him like an outsider. They asked questions, joked with him, introduced themselves briefly, then moved on, giving him space to adjust. "Frankfurt folks don't bite," Tiffany told him with a grin as she sat beside him on the bench. "They'll embrace you before you even know what's happening." He nodded slowly, watching Kai push Leo down the slide, while laughing loud enough for the whole park to hear. "They're happy," Ralph said quietly. "They're kids," Tiffany replied. "They don't need much to find joy. Just love. Just safety." Ralph's eyes lingered on the twins, then shifted back to her. "I'm starting to understand that." The softness in his tone made her chest tighten just a little. She saw it now. Not just his consistency, but his gentleness, something she never expected from a man who carried himself with such composure. He didn't just show up physically. He showed up emotionally, learning how to exist in their small, lively world, and without trying, without forcing his way in. He was becoming part of it. It was late afternoon when Ralph finally gathered the courage to invite Tiffany and the boys to his home. He had rehearsed the question quietly in his car, unsure how she would react. His world was nothing like hers. Quieter, colder, shaped by wealth instead of community, and he didn't want to overwhelm her. But Tiffany surprised him by agreeing without hesitation. "Okay," she said. "But the twins don't sit still, you've been warned." Ralph nodded. "I'll adapt." She laughed softly. "I'd pay to see that." Soon after, Tiffany buckled the boys into their seats, while Ralph opened the doors, making sure they were secure. The drive to his property brought rows of tall trees, manicured hedges, and long stretches of open land. Tiffany watched thoughtfully through the window. "Your place far," Leo observed from the back seat. Ralph glanced in the mirror. "A little," Kai nodded solemnly. "We going to a castle?" But when the mansion finally came into view, tall columns, wide windows, and a polished entryway, Tiffany exhaled sharply. "Okay," she murmured. "Maybe a little like a castle." The boys gasped dramatically. "Mommy, it big!" Kai shouted. "It's so shiny," Leo added. Ralph felt a flicker of embarrassment as he parked. He wasn't used to people reacting to his home. Most adults already knew what to expect, and the ones who didn't often hid their shock behind polite words. Tiffany didn't hide anything. "Wow," she said, stepping out slowly. "This is something." He opened her door gently. "It's just a house." She raised an eyebrow. "Sir, this is not just a house. This is 3 houses and a half." The boys ran toward the front steps, their feet pattering across the stone like they were exploring a theme park. "Wait," Tiffany called. "Don't touch anything." They kept going. Ralph bit back a smile. "It's fine. Everything is sturdy." Inside, the hallway opened into tall ceilings and clean lines. The boys froze at the sight of a large painting and a wide staircase. "This where Batman live?" Leo asked in a whisper. Ralph cleared his throat. "No, I'm not Batman." Kai squinted at him suspiciously, as if deciding whether that was the truth. Tiffany shook her head with amused disbelief. "They're going to ask you that every time we come here." "I'll prepare my answers," Ralph replied. The boys darted from room to room, gently nudging decorative pieces, peeking under chairs, and pressing their faces against the tall windows as if trying to see through time. Their excitement echoed through the halls, bouncing off the polished surfaces that had been silent for far too long. Tiffany followed them quickly, apologizing every 5 steps. "I'm so sorry," she said. "They don't know how to act in fancy places." "They're fine," Ralph assured her. "Really? No, really," she insisted. "I can feel your furniture panicking." He actually laughed, a sound he wasn't used to hearing from himself. "They're children. It's refreshing." She paused at that word, refreshing, as if it revealed something she didn't expect. They eventually reached his office, a room lined with bookshelves and quietly lit by a single lamp. Tiffany stepped inside cautiously, her eyes drawn to the large desk and the framed documents on the walls. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked softly. I'm grateful, but this feels important." Ralph hesitated. Then he walked to a drawer on the right side of his desk and opened it slowly. Inside was a small photo frame face down. He picked it up carefully, turning it over before meeting her gaze. "I wanted you to know why I reacted the way I did when the boys called." Tiffany's breath caught. He handed her the frame. Inside the photo stood a woman with warm eyes and a soft smile, holding a little girl no older than 1. Tiffany blinked, her voice soft. "She's beautiful." "She was," Ralph said quietly. "Both of them were." Tiffany looked up, eyes searching his. "What happened?" Ralph took a slow breath. "My wife got sick 8 years ago. Complications spread faster than doctors expected. And my daughter, She had health issues from birth. We did everything we could, but she didn't reach her first birthday. Silence filled the room, thick with emotion but not uncomfortable. A pause that honored the weight of his words. Tiffany held the frame gently. "Ralph, I'm so sorry. Truly." He nodded, gazing at the photo. "I built this house during that time. Bigger than necessary. Quieter than healthy. I thought the space would make me feel less empty." Tiffany's fingers traced the edge of the frame thoughtfully. "The twins remind you of her," she said softly. "Yes," he admitted. "Their laughter, their energy, their fear when they called me. It brought something back I thought I had closed off." Her eyes softened. "You didn't close it off. You just didn't have anyone to give it to." The truth of her words struck him deeply, so deeply he couldn't speak right away. Kai suddenly burst into the room holding one of Ralph's expensive ties. Leo followed, proudly carrying a decorative bowl. "I found treasure." Ralph rushed forward, panic flickering. "Leo, put that down carefully." "Please?" Leo placed it on the ground, sideways. Ralph nearly winced. Tiffany snorted with laughter, and the sound melted the tension instantly. "You okay?" she teased. He exhaled. "I will be. Eventually." Kai wrapped the tie around his head. "Ralph, I a superhero now." Ralph couldn't help but smile. "You look powerful." The twins giggled and ran off again. Tiffany handed the photo back to Ralph gently. He looked at her. Truly looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Not friendship, not romance. Something in the middle, growing quietly. "You deserve to know who I am," he said. "Especially if I'm going to be around." Tiffany swallowed, warmth rising in her chest. "Then stay around," she said softly. His heart thudded once. "Hard. I plan to," he replied. The visit to Ralph's mansion marked a shift neither he nor Tiffany could deny. Something quiet had settled between them. An understanding. A recognition of how deeply their worlds were intertwining. After that day, Ralph became even more present in their lives, not because he felt obligated, but because something in him pulled him toward them in a way he couldn't explain. Morning, afternoon, evening, he appeared with the same calm knock on Tiffany's door, always at the times when the boys needed an extra hand, or when Tiffany looked like she was fighting sleep just to stay upright. One morning, Ralph arrived with groceries balanced in both arms. Tiffany opened the door with a surprised blink. "You went shopping?" she asked. "I noticed you were running low on a few things," he said simply. She glanced at the bags. "Ralph, this is not a few things. This is half the store." He paused, unsure if he overstepped. "Is that too much?" She opened one bag and found cereal, fruit, juice pouches, bread, milk, oatmeal, and small snacks the twins loved, but she rarely bought because they were just outside her budget. Her chest tightened a little. "You didn't have to do all this," she murmured. "I know," he said, "but it looked like you needed it." Before she could respond, Kai ran past her legs and threw himself at Ralph with all the enthusiasm of a child greeting a superhero. "Ralph! You come again." Leo appeared seconds later, attaching himself to Ralph's leg. "We eat snacks you bring?" Ralph chuckled. "After breakfast, yes." Tiffany shook her head with a mix of amusement and disbelief. "They're going to think you're made of snacks from now on." "Could be worse," Ralph replied. He helped her unpack the groceries, organizing them neatly in cabinets while she tried not to stare at how comfortable he looked in her kitchen. The man who once lived in silence now seemed perfectly content surrounded by the twins' constant chatter. After lunch, Ralph followed the boys into the living room where they insisted he join them for their favorite activity, pretending to cook imaginary meals. Kai handed him a plastic pan. "You make eggs," Leo added. "No, he make pancakes." Ralph glanced between the two instructions, confused. "I can make both?" The twins cheered. Tiffany leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. Something warm tugged at her chest. Ralph wasn't just helping. He was becoming part of their routine, learning the rhythm of their little household like he had been quietly absorbing their habits all along. But it was the small things that caught her attention most. The way he crouched to the twins' height when speaking to them. The way he never raised his voice, even when chaos erupted. The way he looked at her with steady concern when he thought she wasn't noticing. He wasn't pretending to care. He wasn't forcing himself into their life. He was simply there, every single day. Later that afternoon, Tiffany stepped outside to take out a bag of trash. The neighborhood women were lounging on their porches again, watching over everyone as always. One of them squinted at Ralph through the window. "That man's still around, huh?" "Oh, he around," another woman added with a grin. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "He's helping with the boys, that's all." The first woman hummed. "And is he helping with you too?" Tiffany nearly dropped the trash bag. "No, it's not like that." When she returned inside, Ralph was reading a picture book to the twins, even though the book was upside down. Tiffany bit her lip to avoid laughing. "You know the book is flipped, right?" she asked. Ralph blinked, then looked at the pages. "Oh, I was wondering why the sentences weren't connecting." Kai giggled. "You funny, Ralph," Leo chimed in. "We teach you reading." Ralph let them turn the book correctly, then continued reading with exaggerated expression. The twins were delighted. Tiffany leaned against the doorframe again, but this time she watched him differently. Her breath softened. Her gaze lingered. She liked him, not because he was wealthy. Not because he had helped her in a crisis. Not because he visited often. She liked him because he cared. Deeply, quietly, genuinely. And that scared her a little. She had lived long enough to know that caring came with risk. But watching Ralph read to her boys like they were his own, she couldn't deny the warmth building in her chest. As the day wound down, Ralph helped clean up the toys scattered across the floor. "Tiffany," he said as he gathered the last block, "do you want me to come by tomorrow?" She glanced at the twins, already sprawled on the couch in sleepy heaps, then looked back at him. "Yes," she said softly. "I would." Ralph nodded, but the quiet relief in his eyes said more than his words ever could. He didn't know what this feeling was becoming. He didn't know how deep it would grow. He only knew that leaving felt harder every day. And Tiffany watched him walk toward the door and felt something inside her shift again. Whatever was happening between them, it wasn't small anymore. The morning of their first family-to-style outing arrived with a brightness that matched the twins' energy. Tiffany stood in front of the mirror tying her hair back, smoothing the front of her dress, trying to steady the flutter in her chest. She kept reminding herself this wasn't a real date, not the traditional kind anyway. But the moment Ralph knocked on the door, her heart decided it was one. When she opened it, he was standing there with the boys' favorite juice boxes in one hand and a bouquet of simple, soft-colored flowers in the other. "For you," he said. Tiffany blinked, surprised. "Ralph, these are beautiful." He nodded once, almost shyly. "I thought they matched your energy." Her breath caught, not because of the flowers, but because he said it in a quiet voice that made the words feel sincere, not rehearsed. She took them gently. "Thank you," she whispered. Kai and Leo darted past her before she could say more. "Ralph, we ready? We go garden." Ralph chuckled. "Yes, we're going." The botanical garden sat on the edge of town, stretching with winding paths, tall greenhouses, and fields of flowers that shifted with the breeze. When they arrived, the boys jumped out first, racing toward the entrance with arms spread wide. "This place pretty," Kai shouted. "Look! Big trees," Leo added. Tiffany watched them with a smile she didn't need to force, then turned to Ralph. "Thank you for bringing us here. I wanted somewhere peaceful," he said. "Somewhere the boys could explore." "And somewhere I could breathe," she said softly. He didn't respond with words, only with a look that made her chest warm. They walked slowly at first, watching the twins stop at every petal, rock, and butterfly, as if discovering the world for the first time. Ralph stayed close to them, lifting them gently whenever they wanted a better view. "You're good with them," Tiffany observed. "I'm learning," he replied. "They're excellent teachers." She laughed, and something in him shifted again. As they continued walking, Ralph found himself admiring the way the sunlight touched Tiffany's skin, how her smile lifted easily now, how she looked free in a way he hadn't seen before. She wasn't overwhelmed or tired or guarded. She was simply present, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. They reached a wooden bridge overlooking a pond, and Tiffany leaned against the railing, taking in the view. The twins tossed small pebbles into the water, cheering every time the ripples spread. Ralph stood beside her. "You look happy," he said quietly. "I am," she admitted. "It's been a while since I felt light. Thank you for this. You deserve moments like this," he said. She looked at him then, directly, and something unspoken passed between them, something fragile and growing. But the moment didn't last long. A woman walking with a small group slowed her steps as she passed them. She looked at Tiffany, then at Ralph, her expression shifting into something sharp and judgmental. "Well?" she said with a dry smile. "I didn't expect to see you here, Ralph." Tiffany straightened subtly. The woman's eyes flicked to Tiffany's dress, her shoes, her fingers with no jewelry, then to the twins tossing rocks at the edge of the water. "And I certainly didn't expect this." Tiffany exhaled quietly. She'd felt looks like this before, the kind people gave when they believed she didn't belong. Ralph stepped forward, his voice steady but firmer than Tiffany had ever heard it. The woman's brows lifted. "Her? Really?" "Yes," Ralph replied. "Her." The woman scoffed. "You could be with anyone, Ralph. Why?" "Stop," he said sharply. Even the twins paused, sensing a shift. Ralph continued, "Do not speak about her like that." Tiffany blinked, surprised. Ralph wasn't loud, but his words carried weight. The woman's face paled as she realized she crossed a line she shouldn't have. "I was only saying—" "And I'm only saying this once," Ralph interrupted. "Show respect." The woman swallowed hard, forced a stiff smile, and muttered something before walking off quickly. Tiffany stood frozen, processing what just happened. Ralph turned to her. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. You don't have to apologize," Tiffany said, though her voice trembled slightly. "People like her." "It's not new. It shouldn't be normal," he replied. "And I won't let anyone make you feel small." For the first time Tiffany saw it. Not just his kindness, not just his gentleness, but the depth of his loyalty. The seriousness in his eyes made her heart press against her ribs. "Ralph," she whispered. He stepped closer, not touching her but close enough she could feel the warmth of him. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "You deserve respect, and I'll make sure you have it." The boys suddenly ran back to them, holding sticks like swords. "Mommy, look, we knights!" Tiffany laughed, wiping her eyes quickly. Ralph glanced at her, lingering, and she saw something new in his expression. Something that didn't feel like confusion anymore. Something that felt like a beginning. The botanical garden trip stayed with Ralph long after he drove Tiffany and the boys home. Even hours later he found himself replaying the moment he defended her, the way she looked at him afterward, the quiet gratitude in her eyes. Something in him had shifted that day, something he wasn't prepared for but couldn't deny anymore. He wanted to be part of their lives, not just during emergencies, not just for short visits, but truly part of them. And for the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. But his world, the world he had carefully built around silence and privacy, was not done with him. The next morning, while Ralph was still replaying the laughter of the twins in his mind, his phone lit up with call after call from numbers he recognized immediately. His board of directors, his legal team, and his corporate communications staff. He frowned. He answered the first call. "Ralph, where have you been?" his attorney asked without preamble. "We've been trying to reach you since last night." "I spent the day out," Ralph replied, unusually calm. "What's the issue?" "You need to come to the office," his attorney said. "Now." Ralph exhaled slowly. "Tell me what happened." "You were nominated for the statewide humanitarian award," the attorney said. "Your board approved it. And it comes with mandatory press coverage." Ralph froze. He had made sizable anonymous donations over the years, all private, all intentionally hidden. He never wanted credit. The donations were the only way he knew to deal with grief, a silent offering to the world his wife and daughter never got to stay in. He never wanted the spotlight. "Decline the nomination," he said. "You can't," his attorney's voice tightened. "The board wants this." They already informed the organizing committee. They're preparing a full media rollout. Interviews, press photos, public appearances, they're expecting you to make statements. Ralph's jaw clenched. This was supposed to stay private. It can't this time. A surge of dread washed over him. Press. Cameras. Reporters. People digging into his life, showing up at his home, following him. And if they followed him, they would find Tiffany. They would find Kai and Leo. Their simple world, the one he had been welcomed into with gentle warmth, would be exposed overnight. Tiffany, who valued peace and privacy, who worked hard to build a stable life away from judgment, criticism, or attention. She would be caught in a storm she never asked for. His stomach tightened. "I won't do it," Ralph repeated. "You don't have a choice," his attorney said. "The moment the board submitted your name, your participation became part of public record. Several outlets already received the press advisory." Ralph's breath left him in a slow, uneasy exhale. Everything he protected, everything he kept far away from the world, was slipping out of his control. His phone buzzed again. Messages from executives congratulating him, reporters requesting statements, PR staff confirming availability for interviews. He hung up and sat at the edge of his bed, head bowed, feeling a pressure he hadn't felt since the days he lost his family. For the first time since meeting Tiffany, fear crept into him. Not fear of loss, not fear of failure, but fear of causing harm. He imagined cameras outside her apartment. He imagined microphones thrust toward her while she tried to walk her children to daycare. He imagined strangers questioning her, judging her, twisting her role in his life into something ugly. He couldn't let that happen. Not to her. Not to the boys who trusted him. Not to the woman who was slowly becoming the calm in the middle of his otherwise empty world. Later that evening, Ralph drove to Tiffany's apartment, but this time his steps were heavy. Kai and Leo opened the door, cheering loudly as they leapt into his arms, but even their excitement couldn't untangle the knot in his stomach. "Ralph, you come back. We play blocks." He forced a small smile, lifting them both. "Yeah, I'm here." Tiffany appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hey," she said softly. "Dinner's almost ready." He swallowed. "Tiffany, we need to talk." Her expression shifted immediately. She placed the towel down, moved closer. "What happened? Are you okay?" "No." He wasn't, but he didn't want to alarm the twins. "Can we talk outside?" he asked. She nodded, worry deepening. The boys clung to him instantly. "Where you going?" "I'll be right back," he murmured, kissing their heads gently. "Stay inside." They let go reluctantly. Tiffany stepped out with him onto the porch as the evening breeze drifted through the neighborhood. Porch lights from nearby homes glowed softly, carrying the familiar comfort of community, the opposite of the pressure swirling inside Ralph. He took a breath. "Tiffany, something big happened today." She watched him closely. "What is it?" "I was nominated for a major humanitarian award," he said. "Statewide. It comes with interviews, cameras, articles, publicity I've spent years avoiding." Tiffany blinked slowly. "Oh, that sounds big." "It is," he replied, "and the worst part is that I can't reject it. My board already approved the nomination and moved everything forward." She remained silent, sensing a deeper fear beneath his words. Ralph continued, voice lower. "The media will start looking into my life. They'll follow me, and eventually they'll find their way to you." Her heart dropped. Ralph. For her. Tiffany stood on the porch, her hand resting against the wooden railing as she tried to absorb everything Ralph had just told her. The quiet of the neighborhood wrapped around them. Soft porch lights, distant laughter from across the street, a breeze that carried the scent of evening cooking from the next building. But the calm outside didn't match the tightness in Ralph's chest. "Ralph," she said gently, stepping closer. "Look at me." He did. reluctantly, like he expected her to pull away when their eyes met. "I never wanted this," he murmured. "I never wanted cameras or interviews or anyone digging into my life. I built my world to avoid all of that. And now, it's the one thing that could hurt the people I care about." Tiffany's brows pinched. "The people you care about?" His throat tightened. He hadn't meant to let that slip out so plainly, but it was the truth, one he no longer had the strength to hide. "Yes," he said softly. "You, Kai, Leo. I care about all of you more than I expected, more than I know how to handle." Tiffany lowered her voice. "You think some reporters can scare me away after everything I've lived through?" "This is different," he insisted. "You work hard to keep peace in your home. You protect your boys from anything that could break that peace. And He stopped, frustration rising. "Tiffany, I don't want to be the reason your life gets thrown into chaos." She stepped even closer, her eyes steady on his. "You're not chaos, Ralph. You don't know that yet," he whispered. "Yes," she said firmly, "I do." He blinked, startled by the certainty in her voice. Tiffany took a slow breath. "I've seen chaos. Real chaos. I've seen stress take a mother down to the floor. I've seen fear in my baby's eyes because they didn't know what to do. I've had nights where everything felt like it was falling apart." Her voice softened. "But you didn't bring any of that into my life. You brought help. You brought support. You brought consistency I haven't had in years." Ralph swallowed, emotions rising in his chest. "But the attention, we'll handle it," she said, her tone quiet but strong. "Together." Ralph shook his head slowly. "I'm terrified you'll regret letting me in." She tilted her head slightly. "Have I given you any reason to think I would?" He didn't answer. She continued. "You think I don't see it? The way you look after Kai and Leo? The way you show up without being asked? You've stepped into our world with so much care. That doesn't happen every day." Ralph breathed out shakily. "Tiffany, I've spent years avoiding connection. Years convincing myself I didn't have anything left to give. Meeting you changed that. Meeting your boys changed that." A silence settled between them. Not heavy, but full. "And now," he added in a strained whisper, "I'm scared my world will swallow yours." Tiffany reached up and touched his cheek, carefully, like she wanted him to feel steadiness through her fingertips. "Ralph, listen to me," she said. "I choose you." He froze. "And if this is going to work," she continued, "you have to choose us too. Not halfway. Not with one foot in and one foot out. Fully." Her hand dropped from his cheek, but her eyes didn't leave his. "You say the world might come for you," she said. "Let it. Just don't let go of me in the process." Ralph exhaled, a slow breath that felt like it carried months of unspoken emotions. "Tiffany, I don't want to let go." "Then don't," she whispered. Just as the air shifted between them, the front door creaked open and two small faces peered out. Kai whispered loudly, "Mommy, you okay?" Tiffany laughed softly, wiping a stray tear before it could fall. "We're okay, babies. Go back inside for just a minute." They nodded and slipped back in, the door clicking shut behind them. When Tiffany turned back to Ralph, something softened in his expression. A mixture of relief, longing, and realization. He stepped closer. "Tiffany, can I—" He didn't finish the question. He didn't need to. Tiffany closed the space between them with a gentle nod. Ralph lifted a hand, touching her cheek lightly, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw before leaning forward. Their lips met softly. Nothing rushed, nothing bold. Just a warm, steady moment where two people allowed themselves to feel something they'd spent weeks dancing around. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. It was real. When they pulled back, Tiffany rested her forehead against his. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "One step at a time." Ralph closed his eyes for a moment, letting the truth of her words settle into him. "Yes," he murmured. Together, and in that quiet, tender space, something solid formed between them, something that wouldn't shake easily. Before we continue, please like this video and comment something encouraging for Tiffany and the boys. Your support helps more people discover powerful true life stories just like this one. The day of the statewide award arrived faster than Ralph expected. Despite weeks of preparation from his board, publicists, and assistants, he still felt the same weight he felt when he first learned about the nomination, the kind of pressure that made his chest tighten every time he imagined cameras turning toward him. He didn't care about being praised. He didn't care about standing on a stage. He cared about one thing only: keeping Tiffany and the twins safe from the spotlight. Tiffany ironed his dress shirt the night before, her movements quiet and gentle. Kai and Leo watched from the couch, both holding their toy cars like the ceremony was some grand event they were personally responsible for cheering on. "Mommy, Ralph gonna win?" Kai asked. Tiffany smiled. "Yes, baby, he's already won." Leo nodded confidently. "He brave." Ralph froze at that word. Brave. He didn't feel brave. He felt completely out of place. But the twins believed in him without hesitation, and Tiffany supported him with a quiet strength that steadied him more than anything else could. The ceremony took place inside a large conference hall filled with business leaders, community organizers, and reporters waiting to capture the moment. Ralph stepped out of his car with a composed expression. But inside, every instinct told him to turn back. His security team guided him through the side entrance, far away from the main media line. His board had requested press photos, but he refused to walk through the cameras, refusing interviews with a firm no before they even asked. He wasn't here for attention. He wasn't here for celebration. He was here so he could protect the people he loved from the noise of his world. Tiffany sat near the front row, the twins beside her dressed in neat clothes she had carefully chosen. Kai kicked his legs excitedly. Leo held a small snack container in his lap, trying his best not to spill it. When Ralph stepped onto the stage, Tiffany's breath caught. He didn't look like the quiet billionaire who hid from the world. He looked like someone stepping into a storm with purpose. The host introduced him, listing his anonymous contributions over the years, his involvement in local programs, and the many projects he supported privately. As he took the microphone, the room quieted. Ralph cleared his throat. "Thank you," he began, voice steady though his heart pounded. "This recognition wasn't something I sought, but I want to use this moment for something meaningful." Cameras clicked urgently. The press leaned forward. He continued. "For years I kept my work private, not because I didn't believe in helping, but because I didn't want attention. I didn't want praise. I simply wanted to support the communities that needed it." Tiffany's fingers curled around the edge of her seat. "But today," Ralph said, "I want to dedicate this recognition to single mothers across Kentucky, to women who work without rest, who love without limits, who carry homes on their backs and still find the strength to give more. They are the backbone of countless families, often without help, often without recognition." Tiffany's eyes stung instantly. Kai leaned toward her. "Mommy, why you look like that?" She wiped her cheeks quickly. "I'm okay, baby. I recently met a family that reminded me of resilience. A mother raising two beautiful boys with courage I admire more than I can say. She opened my eyes to the strength it takes to keep going even when life feels impossible." Tiffany covered her mouth as her tears fell freely. He wasn't speaking in general. He was speaking about her. "The funds connected to this award," Ralph said, "will go toward resources for single mothers, childcare, emergency support, housing assistance. They deserve stability. They deserve peace. They deserve recognition." The audience applauded, but Tiffany barely heard it. She could only look at Ralph with her heart pounding, overwhelmed at how boldly he honored her without ever saying her name. When he stepped off the stage, reporters surged forward. "Mr. Lawson, just a few questions. Who inspired this? Are you planning?" He walked straight past them without slowing. "No interviews," he said sharply. "I won't be answering questions today." Security formed a barrier as he walked toward the quiet corner where Tiffany waited with the twins. "Kai, Leo," Tiffany whispered. "Stand up straight. Ralph's coming." The boys scrambled to their feet, waving wildly as Ralph approached. He knelt down first, meeting the twins' bright eyes. "Did I do okay?" he asked softly. Kai nodded hard. "You did good." Leo added, "You talk like a superhero." A small laugh escaped Ralph's chest. Then he stood and faced Tiffany. She didn't say anything at first. She simply wrapped her arms around him and pulled him close. Her cheek pressed against his shoulder, her breath warm and shaky. "Ralph," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to," he replied. "You deserved it." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her cheeks wet, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling. "For protecting us, for thinking of mothers like me, for all of it." Ralph cupped the back of her head gently. "I meant every word." And in that moment, surrounded by applause, flashes of cameras he refused to face, and the noise of a world trying to pull him in, the only thing that mattered to Ralph was the quiet truth between them. He didn't lose himself today. He didn't lose her. He faced the public eye while choosing them. After the award ceremony, Ralph's life didn't go back to normal. Quietly, steadily, in a way that felt less like disruption and more like purpose taking shape. The next week, Ralph made a decision, one he thought through carefully, not wanting to overwhelm Tiffany or uproot her stability. He didn't move into her apartment. He didn't ask her to move into his mansion. He simply moved closer. A small, comfortable home just 2 blocks from her building, close enough to help, far enough to respect her space. When he told her, she stared at him with wide eyes. "You moved?" she asked. "Yes, here. Yes, 2 blocks away?" He nodded again. Tiffany let out a breath somewhere between shock and something warm she couldn't name. "You really meant it," she whispered. "I don't make promises lightly," Ralph replied. She looked away briefly, touched in a way she wasn't prepared for. Daily life became a new rhythm, one built around the 4 of them. Every morning, Tiffany woke to the sound of tiny footsteps followed by Leo whispering urgently, "Is Ralph here? Mommy, is he here yet?" Sometimes he actually was, standing at the door with breakfast sandwiches and 2 small cups of juice for the boys. "Morning," he'd say, offering Tiffany a 3rd sandwich. "You need to eat too." She'd roll her eyes playfully. "I can make breakfast, Ralph." "I know," he said, "but this way you don't have to." Kai and Leo always cheered. After breakfast, Ralph buckled them into their car seats, a task he first approached awkwardly but eventually mastered, though Leo still corrected him occasionally. "No, Ralph," Leo would instruct, pointing solemnly. "Clip first, then click." Ralph accepted the correction like he was being trained by a small professional. "Yes, Leo. Clip, then click." Tiffany watched him from the doorway with a quiet smile, the kind that spoke volumes about how much her heart was changing. Afternoons held their own routine. Sometimes, Ralph joined Tiffany on grocery runs, pushing the cart while the twins rode inside giggling. Sometimes he stopped by after work with fresh fruit or cooked dinner so she didn't have to. Kai had begun saying, "Ralph's food good," which Tiffany found hilarious because Ralph barely knew how to season anything until she taught him. One evening, while chopping vegetables together, Ralph paused. "Tiffany," he said, "you don't have to do all of this alone anymore." She froze for a moment, knife hovering above the cutting board. "I've been alone a long time," she said softly. "It's hard to let someone help." "I know," he replied, "but I'm here, not to take over your life, just to be part of it." "That's enough," he said. Evenings became the heart of their budding family. They played board games. They watched movies with the twins sprawled across both their laps. They cleaned up toys together while Kai explained every dinosaur figurine in great detail, and Leo made sound effects for each one. Ralph absorbed every moment. One night, when the twins fell asleep early on the couch, Ralph picked them up effortlessly, resting one on each shoulder. Tiffany followed him to their room, watching him lay them down, tucking the blankets around their small bodies with a tenderness that made her throat tighten. He wasn't performing. He wasn't pretending. When they stepped into the hallway, Tiffany leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. "You're good with them," she said. "I care about them," Ralph replied simply. Tiffany looked up at him, her eyes softening. And me? Ralph held her gaze, no hesitation in his answer. You especially. Heat warmed her cheeks. She looked away, smiling in a way she hoped he didn't notice, but he did. As weeks rolled by, the twins' attachment to Ralph only deepened. Every drawing they made at daycare featured him. Every story they told began with Ralph said, or Ralph did. Every scraped knee or broken toy was a reason to run to him for comfort. One afternoon, Kai sat on Ralph's lap holding a broken toy truck. Fix it? He asked. Ralph inspected it seriously. I'll try. Leo climbed onto his other knee. You strong. You can do it. Tiffany watched from across the room, her chest warming at the sight. She had raised her boys with everything she had, every bit of strength and patience she could muster. Yet watching Ralph slip into their lives so naturally made her realize something she had forgotten. She wasn't meant to carry everything alone, and Ralph wasn't offering help out of pity. He was offering partnership, a place beside her, a place with her sons. One night, after the boys fell asleep and the apartment quieted, Tiffany stepped onto the balcony. Ralph followed her a moment later, leaning against the railing beside her. You okay? He asked. She nodded, just thinking, about. With a small sigh, Tiffany gazed toward the dim streetlights. About how much has changed, how much you've changed things. He looked down, almost nervous. Is that all right? Tiffany turned toward him fully. It's more than all right, Ralph. Her voice softened. It feels like someone finally joined my team. Someone who cares about more than just the boys. Someone who cares about me. Ralph's breath caught slightly. I do, he murmured. More than you know. Her chest fluttered, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she let herself admit the truth. She wasn't just falling in love with Ralph. She was learning what it felt like, to be loved back. The weeks after Ralph moved closer felt different. Not rushed, not overwhelming, just steady. Tiffany noticed it in small ways first. The feeling of calm that settled inside her whenever he stepped into the room. She hadn't realized how much she longed for peace until she finally felt it. One Thursday morning, Ralph insisted on taking the boys to daycare while Tiffany prepared for her shift. Kai and Leo ran circles around him as he tried to guide them through the hallway, both wearing their tiny backpacks covered in cartoon stickers. Ralph, we fast! Kai shouted as he bolted ahead. Leo attempted to keep up, but tripped over his shoelaces, landing on Ralph's feet. Ow! I fall! Ralph lifted him instantly, brushing dust off his pants. You're okay, he said, adjusting Leo on his hip. Let's slow down. No, Leo whispered. We race. Ralph glanced at her, one twin in his arms, the other tugging his sleeve. No, he admitted. But I think I'm learning. She smiled. You're doing great. He felt the warmth of those words more deeply than he expected. When they reached the daycare, Kai and Leo raced ahead again, running straight toward their teacher. The room buzzed with children, toys, and morning chatter. Ralph walked inside holding their jackets. Tiffany followed close behind, signing them in. Kai tugged the teacher's hand enthusiastically. Guess what? He said, bouncing. We got someone. The teacher knelt down. Someone? Who? Leo pointed dramatically at Ralph. Him! Ralph blinked, unsure where this was going. The teacher smiled. And who is he? Kai's chest puffed proudly. He Mommy's person. Leo repeated it loudly. Mommy's person? That mean he ours too. The room seemed to pause for Ralph, just long enough for the words to settle beneath his ribs. Mommy's person? He felt something warm and unfamiliar swell in his chest, something that tightened his throat before he could speak. Tiffany froze behind him, eyes wide, cheeks warming. She hadn't expected that. She definitely hadn't prepared for it. The teacher smiled at Ralph with a knowing nod. They adore you. Ralph swallowed hard. I adore them, too. Kai tugged his hand one last time. You come back later? Leo added. Promise? Ralph crouched down so he could look them both in the eye. I'll be here, he said. Always. The boys hugged him before running off to join their classmates. As soon as they disappeared, Ralph stood up, slowly, almost shakily, and Tiffany noticed the way he blinked a few times too quickly. She stepped closer, touching his arm gently. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" He nodded once, but his voice didn't cooperate. "They see me that way," he finally said, barely above a whisper. "As someone who belongs with you." Tiffany's expression softened. "You do belong with us." Ralph looked away, trying to maintain composure, but emotion gathered at the corners of his eyes. "I never thought I'd hear something like that again," he admitted. "Not after losing my family. I didn't think I would ever fit anywhere." "You fit with us," she said gently. "And you're not replacing anyone. You're becoming someone new, someone important to them." "And to you?" he asked quietly. Tiffany reached up and touched his face, brushing her thumb along his cheek in a tender motion. "Yes," she whispered, "very important to me." For a moment, Ralph couldn't speak. His chest ached with a fullness he didn't know how to contain. Gratitude, relief, love, all tangled together in a way that felt overwhelming yet peaceful. "I stepped into your life because of a wrong number," he said, voice unsteady, "and somehow it brought me everything I didn't know I needed." Tiffany smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "Sometimes the wrong number calls the right person." Ralph exhaled, finally letting his emotions settle. He reached for her hand, not hurried, not unsure, but with the calm certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was choosing. "And I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I know," she replied. They stood there for a moment in the daycare hallway, surrounded by children laughing, tiny shoes squeaking on the floor, and the distant hum of parents greeting teachers. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. A simple moment in an ordinary building, yet it carried more weight than any award ceremony Ralph had ever attended. That evening, after dinner, and after the twins fell asleep holding their stuffed animals, Tiffany and Ralph sat on her balcony under the soft glow of a street lamp. He rested his hand over hers. "You changed my life," he said quietly. "You changed mine, too," she replied. "Just don't disappear. Not now. Not ever." He turned his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm here for good." A gentle silence settled between them, warm, steady, full of promise. Below them, the neighborhood hummed with its usual nighttime sounds. And for the first time in a very long time, Tiffany felt her life was not just surviving, but growing. Ralph leaned in, kissed her softly, and whispered against her forehead, "We're a family now," with her whole heart. Thank you, dear viewer, for staying with this powerful story. Before you go, please like this video and comment something uplifting for Tiffany and the boys. It helps more people find stories filled with love, healing, and hope.